Welcome to Europe's spaceport here in French Guiana and to your front row seat for the launch of the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer on an Ariane 5 rocket.
Our rocket is here on the launch pad with the JUICE spacecraft on top, ready to begin its journey.
Over the next couple of hours, we will bring you live coverage of launch operations directly from here,
The Jupiter Control Center.
And from here, ESA's mission control at the European Space Operations Center in Germany.
So this is where we're getting the first signals from the spacecraft after launch and confirmation that the solar panels have deployed. We'll be discussing exactly what makes this spacecraft so special. I'm Matt Russell.
I'm Bruno Souza.
I'm Raphael Chevrier.
And I'm Lisa Peterson, and welcome to flight VA260 on the first leg of JUICE's journey into space. There she is, the Ariane 5 rocket standing tall on her launch pad here at Europe's spaceport in French Guiana, with her single passenger today, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer. JUICE safe and sound under the fairing, ready for liftoff in just under half an hour. I'm here in the Jupiter Mission Control Center, and we are some 12 kilometers away from the launch pad. And here, on the other side of this protective wall, which we call the fishbowl here in Jupiter, you can see the operational teams hard at work getting ready with the last preparations for today's launch. Opposite me here, we have partners, VIPs and guests, all waiting for liftoff, comfortably seated. And they are among the happy, well, the very lucky few who will get to see the liftoff with their own eyes. They'll feel it as well from the terraces on either side here of Jupiter. And I'm very happy to welcome Stéphane Israël, CEO of Arianespace. Welcome to Rotor Space, Stéphane.
Good morning, Liz.
So you're here to give us an update on the situation, but first of all, a very, very special mission today with an outstanding passenger under the fairing of Ariane 5.
For sure, JUICE is an outstanding mission. I mean, this mission has involved more than 21 partners around ESA and Airbus Defence and Space. And so today is a very important day for us because this mission is a unique mission towards Jupiter. It is the start of an 8-year journey.
And is this type of mission a particular challenge for your teams here?
So this is a 30th scientific mission Arianespace is going to deliver for ESA, and the most recent one have been James Webb and before Bepi Colombo, so we know how to deliver them. But it is an escape orbit, so it means that after 27 minutes of flight, we will have given to the JUICE a speed of more than 10 kilometers per second to allow JUICE to escape from the Earth attraction. So this is what we are going to deliver today.
And what's the situation looking like at the moment? I can see everything is green on the status board.
Yes, so everything is green, and so to lift off, you need 3 parameters to remain green up to the very end. The launcher should be ready, and up to now the launcher is ready. JUICE should be ready, and up to now JUICE is ready. And the final parameter, which is very important, is the weather. And we will make 2 last checks for the weather, 20 minutes before the launch and 10 minutes before the launch, and we will see what will be the situation at this moment.
Thank you so much, Stéphane. I'm going to let you get back into the fishbowl where you're heading up the flight desk, and we'll speak to you right after separation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.
So, of course, launch operations are underway here, final preparations, but some 7,500 kilometers away, over the Atlantic, in Darmstadt, Germany, at the European Space Agency's mission control. The operational teams that are going to take over control of the spacecraft once it's separated from the mothership are on standby. And we're going to go straight over to Darmstadt and hear how things are going over there. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello to our watchers. Welcome to ESOC, the European Space Operations Center facility here in Darmstadt, Germany, in the heart of the Mission Control Center of Operations. My name is Matt Russell, and I'll be your host for this second half of this really special JUICE broadcast. And behind the glass here, we have our resident expert, Bruno Souza, who is a deputy director, flight director for JUICE. Hello, Bruno. Can you give us an update of what's exactly happening now in the mission control?
Thanks, Matt. Everybody's getting goosebumps over here. Just a few minutes ago, Flight Director Andrea Komatsu gave us a roll call, and I think we have footage of that, and we're going to show it to you right now.
To all stations, this is OD on the briefing loop for the roll call of the JUICE mission. Please reply to my call with your call sign and status go or no go. OM.
OM.
Go. SOM.
SOM go.
Data handling.
Data handling go.
AOCS.
AOCS go.
Platform.
Platform go.
Flight dynamics.
Flight dynamics go.
Project rep.
Project rep go.
Project support.
Project support go.
Softcode.
Softcode go.
Software support.
Software support go.
STRAC.
STRAC go.
Scheduling.
Scheduling go.
Thanks. This completes the roll call for JUICE. We are go for launch.
So we're all ready for launch, just waiting for the rocket to get out of the launch pad. Back to you, Matt.
As you can see, everything's ready for launch. Over to you, back over to you, Lisa, in Kourou.
Very much, Matt. And it was great, actually, to see people whooping here as they heard that everything is ready to go. So we heard it from ESOC. Operational teams are ready over there. The spacecraft is ready here in Kourou. But what about JUICE? Well, I'm with Mihaela, and you're going to tell us from ESA, and you're going to tell us how is JUICE doing? Is JUICE ready?
Morning, Lisa. Yes, JUICE is ready. As the project team, we are so ready. It has been years since we have been waiting for this moment, and we are all very excited. As we speak, my colleagues are a few kilometers away in LBC control room, and yesterday evening at 7:15 p.m., the satellite has been switched on, and together with the flight operators, we are closely monitoring it as we speak. It has been quite an intensive launch campaign, but we are in excellent spirits, and we are excited to watch JUICE starting its journey today towards Jupiter and its icy moons as planned.
Fantastic. You say as planned because your role is schedule controller, huge responsibility. Does that mean you're in charge of making sure it takes off as planned?
Part of my responsibility, yes. But when you speak about scheduling in the agency, it's not one person's job. Actually, it's a team exercise. And thus, the JUICE project team, we are so schedule-oriented. We have a strong planning mindset. And if you take a step back and you look at the impressive mission we are seeing today, you have 10 state-of-the-art instruments, you have an impressive spacecraft, you have the most large solar arrays ever flown for an interplanetary mission, 85 square meters. Then you translate all this information to milestones, you understand how much work it takes and how much excellence in project management.
Mihaela, when we spoke earlier, you told me this is 8 years of your professional life. How are you feeling today in a nutshell?
I'm so excited because honestly, for me, JUICE is my entire career in the agency. I was shortly assigned to this mission when I joined, and I am exceptionally proud to be part of this team. And I want to say, have a good launch to all my colleagues here on the spaceport, my colleagues watching now in Aztec, my colleagues in ESOC, which are working, and my colleagues in ESAC. Have a great launch, everyone. We all worked hard for it, and we all deserve it.
You absolutely do. Thank you so much for being with us, Mihaela. And so, as Mihaela was saying, so many years of work for her teams, for teams around the world. So we're going to take a look at their achievements, and we're going to meet our passenger in this next film.
Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, is a place that holds many secrets. This fascinating gas giant planet and its intriguing moons have raised more questions than answers. Today, these answers are in ESA's grasp, with the very first European mission to Jupiter, JUICE. Short for Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, this spacecraft will explore Jupiter and 3 of its icy moons, Callisto, Europa, and in particular Ganymede. Developed and built by Airbus, JUICE's spacecraft is equipped with 10 top-of-the-line science instruments to explore the Jovian system and investigate whether some of its many environments may be suitable for the formation of life. This grand odyssey of exploration begins with the launch of JUICE on an Ariane 5 rocket from Europe's spaceport in Kourou, an historical mission aiming at solving key mysteries such as the possibility of life in the Jovian system, Ganymede's magnetic field, and last but not least, the formation of Jupiter and its moons. JUICE will also study Jupiter's complex weather, chemistry and climate in detail.
It's a very fantastic mission from the scientific point of view. Very broad science, very interdisciplinary science. We would like to see whether around Jupiter there are places where life could have started. To explore that, we need to find a place with internal energy and with liquid water. And inside the icy moons, we have good reason to believe that there is in fact more liquid water there inside the surface than on Earth.
JUICE is expected to arrive at Jupiter in 2031 and will then make its Jupiter tour and moon's flybys before orbiting Ganymede. This will be the first time a spacecraft orbits any moon other than our own. During its journey, JUICE will face many dangers such as Jupiter's intense radiation belts or its large gravitational pull, but these dangers will be worth it for the science that JUICE will uncover. The gas giant will reveal some of its many secrets in 2032 when the first data will be available. Watch this space.
And back to us here in Kourou. So, talking about explorers, we have two of the faces of space exploration with us here today. And I'm very pleased to welcome two of Europe's most experienced astronauts. We have Matthias Maurer and we have Thomas Pesquet with us here today. So my first question is for you, Matthias. It's all very well, sending JUICE out there, but when we go out there to space, send, spacecraft like JUICE, what does it bring us back here on Earth?
I think at the beginning of everything is the human curiosity. We humans, we want to understand. When we fly to space, we want to understand and learn. It's also applicable in science and technology in general. And once we understand, we want to translate it into applications, see like how can we make our life on Earth easier, better, with the knowledge that we gained in space. And so all the stuff that we do in space, it directly feeds back into applications. Just looking at the huge solar panels of the probe, 85 square meters. It's like today we are talking about green energy to have life on Earth more sustainable. Without solar panels developed for space and then spin off onto Earth applications, this transformation in energy for Earth applications would not be possible. And sometimes it takes longer, sometimes the application will come years after the science has been done. So thanks to Einstein's relativity theory, we have now the best navigation system in the world, the Galileo system, and everybody can use this with a mobile application in their hands.
Thank you very much. So we're sending JUICE out on its journey today, but what about the upcoming destinations for human space exploration?
Yes, so we humans, we can unfortunately not yet travel such distances to Jupiter. So we fly to low Earth orbit, the International Space Station, and once this will end, we will continue with new, more modern platforms. But then we also continue exploration. We are part of the Artemis program. ESA is an essential part of NASA with the European Service Module. So we will be flying to the moon, and Thomas and I and our colleagues from the astronaut corps, we are dreaming of flying the first Europeans to the moon, being among them, hopefully stepping also on the planet. And it shall be a continuous presence on the moon. And on moon we will learn a lot for technology that we spin back to Earth applications, but we will also learn for later on for missions to Mars.
So talking about, going to the moon, Thomas, are you getting ready to, take part in any of these missions that Matthias is telling us about?
I think we are. I think ESA made the bold decision to send Europe onto this adventure, which was the right decision to make. I think we have a variety of destinations today. We should not forget low Earth orbit and the International Space Station. Our friend and colleague Andreas Mogensen is now in the final stretch for his mission, launching in August. And then we'll have a rotation of missions to low Earth orbit. We have new colleagues who have just started at the European Astronaut Center, and we're glad to have them. There's going to be so many missions to fly in the future, and obviously the Artemis missions. Everybody's trying to, do their part. Everybody's trying to contribute what they've learned in space, what they've learned before, to go as a team, and that's what we're focusing on for the years to come.
So I hear the two of you telling me that you're both able and ready to go. Do you see yourself taking off from Europe's spaceport here in French Guiana, Thomas?
I think it'd be a dream, but it's more than a dream because we're having this conversation. We're working on this independent, access to space for humans from French Guiana. We have all the building blocks. We've had a reliable launcher, Ariane 5, Ariane 6 is going to follow suit. We've had the ATV, the transfer vehicle. We've had the CRV, the return vehicle. We have Space Rider. We have everything. We have all the building blocks. We just have to put them together. And for this, you need a vision. I think we have the vision. Now we need a mandate. But tomorrow, you can imagine, now that Europe is more mature, now that Europe is, growing on the scene, people feel more and more European, sometimes because of the crisis around us. But at least the result is we're being more united. And I think that would be a fantastic project to kind of inspire Europe and to channel the best that Europe has to offer and to make Europeans dream for generations to come.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Stay with us because we have Josef Aschbacher. Josef, thank you so much for joining us. You are ESA Director General. Well, a very simple question to you. I mean, we're talking here about, the capability of space explorations. Are you going to make this happen? Human space exploration, of course.
I mean, it needs a lot of people to make this happen. But of course, my job as Director General of ESA is to make sure that the discussion takes place and that we have a discussion in Europe and preparing decisions in order to make this happen. In fact, we just received a report from a high-level advisory group called Revolution Space, and that really means a revolution for Europe in space to really engage, bring Europe one level higher in space exploration, literally, and make sure that Europe has all these capabilities which Thomas and Matthias have just described. So yes, we're doing everything to make it happen. But Lise, today we're here in front of the screens of JUICE. Let's talk about JUICE because that's such an exciting mission.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you, Thomas. Matthias, thank you very much for being with us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are joining us, we are just under 12 minutes to liftoff. And I'm here in Jupiter Control. We're about to see Ariane 5 take off with JUICE under its fairing, heading for Jupiter. And I am here with Raphaël Chevrier from Ariane Space. Raphaël is going to take us through every step along the way of this mission. Welcome to Road to Space, Raphaël.
Hello, Lise.
So why don't you take us through maybe the next steps coming up now?
Oh, absolutely. So Ariane 5 this morning is going to launch towards the east. So at such low latitude, we benefit from what we call the slingshot effect given by the rotation of the Earth, providing enough speed for JUICE. The launcher first performs a pitch maneuver to get into the required direction, and only 2 minutes and 17 seconds after liftoff, the two boosters have done their jobs of providing enough the main thrust, and they are detached from the launcher. And shortly after that, the fairing, which protected the spacecraft from the frictions of the air, is separated in two halves as we have crossed the limits of the atmosphere. We just don't need it anymore. And once the launcher reaches an intermediate orbit, the main stage is cut off and separated. We then enter the second proper phase of the flight with the ignition of the upper stage. The engine powers for about 16 minutes in order to raise speed and altitude and reach the targeted orbit for JUICE. The little towers that we see on the motion picture represent a chain of telemetry stations that are receiving data from Ariane 5 all along the flight path. And after some orientation maneuver, JUICE is separated on a liberations orbit, meaning it will have the required speed to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. This is almost the end of the mission for the launcher perspective, as we still need to perform some disposal maneuvers of the upper stage, but this is definitely the beginning of the journey for JUICE. ESA teams will use the North Sea ground telemetry stations in Australia to acquire signal from the spacecraft and take full control of it.
I think I'll take over from here, Raphael, because I can actually hear...
There's an announcement here.
Yes, announcement here. We're bringing you this information live. I'll actually listen to what's being said in French and I'll come back to you and translate. Sounds like we're heading for...
There is a risk of lightning right here.
Yes, a weather.
The weather is quite challenging.
Right, it's been announced. So Marianne Claire has just announced that we're going to halt the launch operations for now, for today, due to weather conditions. But what does this mean, Raphael?
So it means that we usually check whether the winds at high altitude, the winds in the vicinity of the launch pad, and also the risk of lightning. This is the latest criteria that it's not suited for a launch today. Unfortunately, this is out of our control, but it also reminds you that we don't take any risk when it comes to launching a satellite into space.
Absolutely. So as Raphael was saying, it has been announced that for today, the liftoff is going to be postponed. Of course, our passenger is safe and sound under the fairing, and we'll, of course, be bringing you all the information on a new date as soon as we get it. We have Stéphane Israel, who is going to come and make an announcement to us right now. Stéphane, welcome back. So
yes, thanks.
Faster than we had imagined.
Yes.
But it's beyond our control, right?
Yes, for sure. You know, it's part of our business.
Yeah.
And what is important is when you lift off, you must make sure that all the parameters are green. Again, the launcher was okay, JUICE was okay. But the final checks made by CNES on the weather were not okay. You have two reasons not to lift off: high altitude winds or risk of lightning. Yeah. The high altitude winds were okay. There was a risk of lightning, so now you see red on the screen. What is important is that the launcher and JUICE are in stable configuration and in full security. We will be back tomorrow morning, a few seconds before we aim at lifting off at 8:14 Washington time, 9:14 Guyana time tomorrow morning.
Well, there we go. So Stéphane has actually given us the news here live. So the next date is tomorrow morning, and of course we're going to just bring that time forward by 1 minute. We were due to take off at 9:15. It's going to be 9:14, as you said.
Exactly.
So we will see you all tomorrow at more or less the same time, and we'll hope that the weather is going to be more clement tomorrow.
A little bit of patience, and it will be okay tomorrow. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Stéphane, and be assured that JUICE is safe and sound under the fairing. It's just going to have to be a little more patient. Another 24 hours, let's hope. And that's it from us. Thank you, Stéphane.
Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
1, 0, 0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, Roger, go for deploy.
Base 2 and everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
You're watching live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew 5 mission as they return to Earth. Dragon Endurance departed the International Space Station at 11:20 p.m. Pacific last night with NASA astronauts Nicole Mann and Josh Cassada, JAXA astronaut Koichi Wakata, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. Currently, they're on their way to the targeted splashdown site off the coast of Tampa, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm the Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. And joining me today from NASA Communications is Leah Cheshire.
Thanks, Kate. It's always great to be here, and of course, another exciting day bringing a crew back from the International Space Station. So upon departing the station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. Since then, the crew had a rest period and has since kicked off preparations for re-entry. Things are sounding pretty good so far. So in this next phase of the mission is when things really ramp up and happen pretty quickly. Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew 5 back to Earth.
First, Dragon will maneuver to the correct attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom section of the Dragon capsule, where the heat shield is located. So in order to expose that heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric re-entry, we'll jettison that trunk.
And just a quick look right now inside Crew Dragon with our Commander Nicole Mann on the left and pilot Josh Cassada on the right. After we jettison that trunk, we're looking for that to come up not too long from now, but from there the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform the deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. The burn will last just over 11 minutes once it starts, and it uses the DIRECTO thrusters on Dragon. These are the four located on the forward bulkhead primarily, and it's executed at the apogee or the highest point of Dragon's current orbit around Earth. This will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Tampa, Florida.
That's right, and we're actually looking at that trunk separation to happen in about 3 minutes.
Deorbit sequence start.
And we've heard Dragon copy. Good calls from the core here in Mission Control Hawthorne. That's the Mission Control room you see on your screen. To the crew, another good interior shot. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, that's Anna Kikina, the Roscosmos cosmonaut. That has flown on Crew 5. And then we are also on the other side of the spacecraft. We didn't get a good look at him, but it's Koichi Wakata, the JAXA astronaut that has joined us as well. So, again, good calls. We've heard good confirmation of suit leak checks up until this point. As you can see, the astronauts are in their suits and seats after they had some time to rest and relax over the past, what's it been, 18-ish hours since they undocked yesterday.
Yeah. Like everything that occurs on the International Space Station, everything is scheduled, it's choreographed, including that sleep period, that crew rest period, where basically the crew got to clock off duty and rest, relax, enjoy the view, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at this point in time, like we mentioned, we are coming up to the separation of the claw, which is the mechanism that holds that trunk, that unpressurized section of the Dragon capsule onto the pressurized section. So we're about a minute away from that claw separation, and then trunk separation will occur in about a minute and a half. So yeah, that trunk, like we said before, is the unpressurized section. That's where we can store cargo that is able to be exposed to the vacuum of space. And of course, the astronauts are in the pressurized section. But that heat shield is located at the bottom of the pressurized section. So it's currently being covered up by that trunk. So we'll separate the trunk to expose that heat shield.
Another important thing to note is when we do claw separation, we're separating those umbilicals that connect the trunk to the pressurized section or the actual Dragon capsule where the astronauts are. So the solar cells that are wrapped around the trunk, those will of course be detached, and once we dispose of the trunk, Dragon itself will be on internal battery power.
Yeah, so pretty exciting. All of this, you know, as you mentioned, Leah, it's been 18 hours of progress. But at this point in time, to prepare for the upcoming events, right now the Dragon spacecraft is doing a couple of things autonomously, meaning it's doing it on its own. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon very comfortable for Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna during that re-entry phase. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism. Like I said, that's coming up in about 10 seconds or so. And that will terminate, like Leah just said, that data, the power, and the fluid connections between the capsule and the trunk. So we're standing by to listen for the call out for trunk separation.
And I got one update that we are in the proper attitude for that trunk separation. So
Awesome.
Just one more of those checks that we were standing by to hear. Again, we are just in a waiting game until we have that claw and trunk separation. But that
nominal trunk jettison.
All right, there's that call. Great news.
Right on time.
Dragon stuff.
So as you can hear, that, like we mentioned, is the core calling out to the crew. They report that they copy because they're able to keep track of it on those crew displays that we could see over their shoulders. So again, the claw and trunk just separated. The claw is where those umbilicals for power and telemetry are from the trunk, and its solar arrays connect to the capsule. So now that they've disconnected, again, Dragon is exclusively on battery power. And we just additionally got that confirmation of successful trunk jettison as well, coming right on time at about 5:06 p.m. Pacific. So with that trunk separation, telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is now exposed. The trunk is no longer needed. That is setting us up for our deorbit burn here coming up. It's scheduled to start at 5:11 p.m. Pacific time. Again, we anticipate that will last about 11 minutes.
Yeah, that burn is an important one. That is what commits the crew to that location. Like we said, we're setting up for a landing off the coast of Tampa, Florida, and it's that deorbit burn that is the final burn that Dragon performs to really re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Now, up next, we have the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to re-entry, the slew or maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and the deorbit burn itself. Leah, you did indicate that that attitude was correct and that we're going to start that deorbit burn soon. That will be the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the four thrusters located on top of the vehicle near the nose cone, it's the last time that those will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of Florida. And like Leah said, it'll last about 11 minutes once it begins.
And again, we're tracking that to come around 5:11 p.m. Pacific, so 8:11 p.m. Eastern time. And we are actually under an hour now until our anticipated splashdown time. So when we say things are happening fast, they are happening pretty fast. But again, this is an autonomous flight like we've seen with Dragon in the past. And our 4 crew members are riding comfortably, it appears. Their visors are still up. Once we get closer to that deorbit burn, we anticipate to hear a call from the core to the crew to go ahead and lower their visors just as a precautionary measure ahead of that major burn.
That's right. And the crew has already completed the required suit leak checks. It's basically when they pull all the zippers up, close the visor into the locked position, and the Dragon spacecraft pressurizes or basically flows a little bit of that air into the suits and holds it at a certain pressure for a certain amount of time, usually a couple minutes, just to make sure that those suits are basically all the zippers are in place and that seal with the visor is functional, and really just making sure that the spacesuit provides its own individual environment for the crew member during the more dynamic events of today's procedures. So like Leah just said, we can see that those visors are still up, but we know that they've already completed the suit leak checks, had 4 good leak checks there. This is also a great shot because you can see the tablet on Commander Nicole Mann's leg. So those are the tablets that are used for monitoring Dragon's progress and the different statuses and states that the vehicle is in. It's also what they use to log the consumables during flight. So we talked before about that period of time where the crew is off duty. They can do whatever they want to do. And as you can imagine, staying hydrated is important, and they use those tablets to track how much water they drank and out of which water bottle it was. So it's just helping to make sure that everything is accounted for. Like we said, we're coming up to the deorbit burn. We're about 5 seconds away from that burn start.
Now again, this is going to be an 11-minute burn, approximately. Just over 11 minutes. It's pretty large. We've got to slow the astronauts down from orbital velocity at 17,500 miles per hour and put them on that track to Tampa, Florida, and that splashdown. If you look, you can see the windows near Josh Cassidy's feet. Actually, it's in the background, but it's bright. It's clearly they're in an orbital daylight. But when you're traveling at orbital velocity, 17,500 miles per hour, you see a sunrise and a sunset every 45 minutes. And if you look on their crew displays, it looks like you can see some of the thrusters are firing. So sounds like the deorbit burn is underway. Again, started right on time at 5:11 p.m. Pacific, targeting about 11 minutes for that burn.
We're looking at about 10 minutes and 20 seconds remaining in that deorbit burn.
Within just the last 10 minutes, Dragon jettisoned its trunk. It initiated that deorbit burn about 2 minutes ago now. So for these operations, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard and have established a safety zone to ensure public safety, safety of those involved and in the recovery operations, as well as, of course, our crew on board the returning spacecraft. So multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations. And Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. So we want to take a moment to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation. And so any other boats interfering in this process can increase risk to the astronauts in the capsule, those teams working to recover them from the water, and of course, even the safety of any public boaters. So for the safety of the crew and yours, we recommend tuning in here. Just sit back and watch. We're going to give you the best views of our astronauts on their way home.
Like I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time those 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire. Dragon Endurance has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site off the coast of Tampa, Florida. As you can see on your screen there right now, Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna are using their screens to keep tabs on that burn duration, the Draco thruster firings, which you can see lighting up on those displays in front of them, the trajectory details like the entry angle, capsule perigee, and how much distance remaining until deorbit burn termination. So in that center screen, you can actually see their trajectory, their planned trajectory there. Dragon is flying itself, so all of the crew, all that the crew has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things, which I know for me personally, I love looking out windows when I'm traveling, especially in airplanes, and so I imagine if I were flying, this part would be really hard for me because I just want to get out of my seat and look out the window.
Those last few space views, I'm with you. I'm always a window seat girl.
Now, with Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna ready to deorbit and splash down back on planet Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations actually helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. So pretty helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, NASA and SpaceX together selected primary and alternate splashdown locations. Obviously, our primary, as we've discussed, is off the coast of Tampa, Florida, and the alternate is Daytona. This selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, the landing sites available, and favorable weather, as you mentioned. Of course, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for those returning crew members.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers until line up with this selected primary site, but it can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in that we need to avoid. That's something we're currently or constantly looking at as weather, so we make the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. For the Crew 5 return, as always, we look at a number of weather items. Some of those more obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew in the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second, or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna back to Florida. Now, I have heard the weather described in 4 different ways for this Tampa site. I've heard go, very go, home run, and stupendous. So it sounds like they have a pretty nice landing site waiting for them today.
I think one time we also got super go.
Oh, wow. That's another level. So once Dragon began flying free yesterday, there were a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed toward the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we are in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which started about 6 minutes ago. That's this last burn in the trip home, and it commits the Dragon capsule to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Before we go any further, let's go ahead and take a minute to meet our crew.
First up is Nicole Mann on the left side of the screen there. She's the California native who holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering and is a colonel in the Marine Corps. She was an FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet test pilot and deployed twice aboard aircraft carriers in support of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nicole was selected by NASA in June 2013 and in the years that followed led the astronaut corps in the development of hardware in the Artemis program. She is the Dragon commander for Crew 5, which was her first space flight. She's right there in the foreground of the shot monitoring this deorbit burn, and she is also the first Native American woman to stay on the International Space Station.
Sitting next to Nicole is Josh Cassida, who grew up in Bear Lake, Minnesota. The physicist and U.S. Navy test pilot flew 23 combat missions and later became an instructor at the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School, which is a common path military officers to take to join NASA. Cassida is one of more than 100 graduates who became astronauts going back to the Mercury program. On Earth, he served as capsule commander in mission control, but for his first space flight on Crew 5, he has served as pilot on Dragon.
In the role of mission specialist, you can't see him here. He's to the left of Nicole. That's Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata. Koichi has a doctorate in aerospace engineering and in 1996 became the first Japanese mission specialist aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour for STS-72. In addition to
this is a tough one, Novosibirsk State Academy of Water Transport in 2006. In 2012, Anna officially became a candidate for the position of test cosmonaut. Crew 5 was Anna's first flight into space as part of the resumption of integrated crews on U.S. Crew spacecraft and the Soyuz with the Russian State Space Corporation, Roscosmos.
Now we are still in that deorbit burn. Those crew members now about 42 minutes away from that targeted splashdown time of 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time. It looks like we have about 2 minutes left, maybe a minute and a half in that deorbit burn, but things are going well so far. All of those 4 Draco engines firing for the last time before closing that nose cone and preparing the capsule for reentry.
There on your screens, you can see the crew is continuing to monitor Dragon's progress in this deorbit burn. We have about a minute and a half, 1 minute and 31 seconds to be exact, remaining in this burn. As you can see with those displays, there's a small set of physical buttons that the crew can use for emergency situations. And then the displays are touchscreen, which has more features that they can use in flight, in addition to the tablets that are on their legs. You can see Nicole's there on her left leg. We can also see a good shot of the control panel for the seats themselves. That's where the mic volume and the push-to-talk button is also located for the crew to use. And I believe that's also where the crew cabin light button is located. So just like an airplane, everybody has their own personal window, or excuse me, personal light that they can
reading
use.
light.
For to read, exactly. There's also USB ports in the Dragon capsule as well.
That's convenient.
Yeah, not on the chairs. It's kind of like above their heads, so they can't really reach them while in flight, but certainly useful during the opportunities where they don't have to be in their seats and can charge up those tablets that they use.
Now, continuing to monitor, again, we are in the deorbit burn and should be wrapping up here very shortly. Crew members just monitoring as this is a completely autonomous flight.
10 seconds remaining in this deorbit burn. That deorbit burn is...
Deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Nose cone closure initiated.
Dragon copy.
Just what we wanted to hear. Deorbit burn is complete. Nominal is always the word we're looking for. And so with that complete, next up is closure of the nose cone, since we won't be using those Draco thrusters anymore.
That's right. That nose cone is what protects those Draco thrusters, as well as that forward hatch, which is the hatch that the crew, of course, used to dock to the space station and get in and out of Dragon while it was docked on station. That side hatch is what they will be using, or the side hatch, which is on the side of Dragon, is what they will be using to get out of the capsule after splashdown, but not that forward hatch, which is what is being covered up now or what will be covered up as we step into nose cone closure.
Wow.
And there we can see a live view of that nose cone closing on Dragon Endurance.
So in the Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn. Those are inhibited now, I should say, meaning that it was safe to latch the nose cone shut. And the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge. This will help keep Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna cool and comfortable during re-entry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes. At this point, like we saw, the nose cone is closing, protecting the forward hatch for reentry. So Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna are using their screens to continue monitoring the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks.
That's exactly right. Now we have a live view there of Mission Control Hawthorne, actually located just to the side of Leah and I. That is where the calls are coming from that we hear to the crew, coming from SpaceX Corps Mike Blasco. Another view there of that nose cone closing. There's about another minute and 14 seconds remaining in the nose cone close. But yeah, those calls that we hear to the crew and basically communicating status of what's happening or what has completed, that comes from that room that you see there on your screen.
We're standing by for the confirmation of nose cone closure. We are now about 18 hours since undock yesterday. So we've mentioned that the crew has had time to rest, relax, maybe eat a little bit, take a nap. But right now are monitoring the continuation of nose cone closure, just waiting on that call out to the crew.
About 30 seconds remaining now to nose cone close. As we said before, since we won't be using the 4 forward Draco thrusters, and obviously the hatch is sealed and shut, we are able to close that nose cone. It's an important step because ultimately this is the, now that the trunk has been separated, this is the last major physical change that Dragon will undergo prior to deorbit burn.
Dragon that the 5 crew members are flying on today is named Endurance. It was dubbed that by the Crew 3 crew in honor of the endurance shown by the NASA and SpaceX teams as they were building and training, or building the spacecraft and training the crew through the pandemic. So I thought that was a really nice way to honor both the teams.
Very fitting for sure. So we're standing by for the call out to confirm that the nose cone has been closed. Again, this is the last major physical change that Dragon undergoes prior to that deorbit burn, or excuse me, prior to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. They've already completed the deorbit burn itself.
Yes.
So this nose cone closure is an important, one of the last steps prior to that re-entry.
That deorbit burn really commits us to returning to Earth. There's not really any waving off after that happens.
And as we mentioned before, we are targeting a splashdown off the coast of Tampa, Florida.
And a look here at both teams monitoring the mission. Over on the left is Mission Control in Hawthorne, and on the right is Mission Control at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Home sweet home. They were in joint operations while Dragon was docked to the International Space Station and until the spacecraft exited the approach ellipsoid. So now the teams are continuing to watch the re-entry of the spacecraft and prepare to welcome the astronauts home, but in a monitoring mode now, since we are obviously quite a ways away from the International Space Station itself. And as for the crew on the International Space Station, they are in a sleep period right now, but they do have the opportunity to watch these broadcasts and watch their friends arrive back on Earth. So hopefully if they're watching, they still take some time to get a little shut-eye later tonight.
So at this point in time, the nose cone is closed. We're just waiting for that to be called out to the crew. From the SpaceX core, next up will be to initiate that nitrox suit purge. Again, that just helps to keep the crew super comfortable during that re-entry period.
And then coming up a little bit later tonight, around 5:50 p.m. Pacific time, that's when the entry of the spacecraft will begin. And during that time, we anticipate to lose communication with the spacecraft as plasma is building up around it. It is traveling through the atmosphere. Eventually, we will regain that signal and communication with the crew members. But of course, Dragon knows exactly what it's doing that entire way home. They are just monitoring and getting closer and closer to splashdown. Again, targeting splashdown for 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:02 p.m. Pacific, off the coast of Tampa, Florida. Nose cone closure continues. It looks like the first set of hooks is closed and the second set is closing as we speak. For our 4 crew members on Crew 5, for 3 of them, this was their first space flight. So Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, and Anna Kikina are all coming home with 157 days in space. As we mentioned earlier, Koichi Wakata this is his 5th space flight. So he is coming home with a total of 505 days in space.
And in following along with the procedures that the crew are stepping through.
Nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon copy.
And there is that confirmation of nose cone closure that we were standing by for. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject that cooled nitrox or nitrogen-oxygen mixture into the air being delivered to the suits worn by Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna. Again, that's what will allow the crew to remain super comfortable while the external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little warm on the outside. That heat shield is pointing forward, leading the capsule to the landing site. And speaking of the heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. The first generation PICA was actually first developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
Yeah, so SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA-X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 commercial resupply missions that successfully resupplied the station on over 20 missions. PICA 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo spacecraft with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down the cost and mass.
The remainder of Dragon capsule is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection, which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during that reentry to ensure that the structural capabilities are maintained.
So while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak re-entry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection systems, also referred to as TPS, coupled with the environmental cooling and life support system, which we refer to as ECLIS, that's in the pressurized interior, that will ensure that Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna stay cool and comfortable during all phases of re-entry through splashdown.
After Crew Dragon Endurance has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. The first will be 2 drogue parachutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in April last year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the capsule detect that they are at the right speed and altitude.
The vehicle velocity at the drogue deploy parachute timing is about 350 miles per hour. So they deployed about 18,000 feet. Now the vehicle velocity when the main parachutes deploy is at approximately 119 miles per hour. They'll deploy at about 6,500 feet. And when we have our water splashdown, the spacecraft is traveling cool and comfortable, approximately 16 miles per hour. So the highest G load we expect the crew to experience during reentry is about 3 to 5 Gs. So again, with nose cone closure, we don't have a whole lot of visual changes, like you mentioned, that we will see. And our crew members are already in their suits and in their seats, as we had a preview of earlier. So coming up next will be our anticipated loss of signal around 5:48 p.m. Pacific time. The crew just got an update on that from CORE here in Hawthorne before we started the broadcast. So again, when we're in that entry period and plasma is building up around the spacecraft, it makes it hard for us to communicate back and forth. So during that time, we won't have communication with the astronauts or the spacecraft itself. However, again, Dragon is fully autonomous and continues guiding those crew members to our splashdown site in Tampa.
That's right. That expected loss of signal, or LOS, as you'll hear it called out, is coming up in 14 minutes on the dot, actually. And it's something that happens every time one of the Crew Dragon capsules returns to Earth. It lasts only a few minutes, but it's something that we will hopefully at that time be able to have some views of Dragon as it is re-entering the atmosphere. But of course, after that entry point, like we mentioned before, those parachutes will deploy shortly thereafter, starting with those 2 drogue parachutes, followed by the main parachutes, which are those beautiful orange and white big parachutes that we just love to see during that re-entry.
And of course, the recovery ship tonight that will be recovering the crew from the waters off the coast of Tampa is Shannon, named in honor of Shannon Walker, who flew on the Crew 1 mission back in 2020. Can't believe it's been 3.5 years now.
So at this point in time, as we mentioned before, we are a few minutes away from the next major milestones, about 12 minutes and 45 seconds from that anticipated LOS. We are taking your social questions from social media. If you have one, be sure to use the hashtag AskNASA, and we'll try to get to them as we can. Sometimes, especially after splashdown, there's some waiting periods. So we'd love to take some questions. We have a couple already, so let's check out what that first one is. This one comes to us from Anchari. At what number is the space station at capacity? Are there interactions between the crew from different countries? That's a great question. I think the fact that it's called the International Space Station is definitely indicative of those interactions that take place among the crew while they are on station. I personally love seeing photos of the crew whenever they're sharing meals together. If they can, I've seen photos where they like to bring up food from that is representative of their country or their culture and share it with the other crew members on board. It's just something I love seeing the crew do.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, different cultures have different holidays as well. So sometimes they share those sorts of traditions. And it's definitely the International Space Station. Sometimes they work together on projects or even on spacewalks. Our JAXA astronaut, Koichi Wakata, went out on, I believe, 2 spacewalks with Nicole Mann, our NASA astronaut, during their stay at the International Space Station. So a lot of working together while they are on board. And of course, there's a lot of work going on the ground between our partner countries as we prepare for these missions. And the question also was a limit to the number of people on the International Space Station. So for the past week, we had 11 people on the space station.
Sounds cozy.
It does. It sounds a little cozy, but the space station is also pretty big. And twice it has housed 13 people. So I don't know that there is a max limit that we have established or determined at this time, but we've seen 13 a couple of times before, and we just wrapped up a full house of 11.
Let's take a look at another one coming to us from Jiu-Jitsu Panda. I love that. Can the astronauts work out or exercise on the space station? Thank you ahead of time. Absolutely. In fact, they have to, right? Yeah. It's required in order to maintain their health, maintain their bone density, which ultimately, keeps them working efficiently while they are on station. But it's also part of the study of how microgravity impacts the human body in terms of, hey, if you do this exercise, what is the result? Are you still maintaining the level of health necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. And they have a few different exercise machines on the space station. So I was talking with Shiva. There's a treadmill that you have to kind of wear a belt, and it's hooked to the treadmill itself, so that as you're running, you're not kind of floating off with every step you take. There's also a stationary bike, and then there's also the advanced resistive exercise device. We call it ARED. It can be modified so that you can use it to do arm workouts, leg workouts, anything from bicep curls to squats, even ab workouts. So they've done a great job at providing options up there, and the crew members are assigned to each one. So they don't get to choose a favorite and only get on the treadmill every day. They have to make sure that they're also maintaining their muscle mass and their bone density with a little bit of weightlifting as well.
One thing that I never took into consideration until I heard it called out during the Crew 6 docking period was basically the Capcom at Mission Control in Houston, I think, was talking to Josh Cassada. I can't quite remember, but it was speaking to one of the astronauts on station and basically told them, hey, you can't do your workout as scheduled because we're about to dock Crew 6, and just the vibrations created from the exercise in the space station, even though it is a really big floating laboratory, it's not floating, orbiting, it was, I never really thought that it had that much of an impact to other things until we heard that call out during that docking where we were right about to dock, and it was basically like, hey, hold off on your scheduled exercise for right now.
Right. We heard that yesterday as well before undock. So just want to mitigate any of those things that might impart loads on the International Space Station when you're in a dynamic event like a docking or an undocking. But of course, they do try and schedule their workouts around those times.
Yeah. Let's take a look at another question. We have a couple minutes here, about 7.5 minutes until that loss of signal.
SpaceX Dragon, all crew, satchels are secure, restraints tightened, the visors are down.
Dragon, we copy. Visors are down, restraints are tight, and tablets and satchels and loose items are secured.
All right, good call out there, just indicating that the crew has everything in place, locked away, make sure nothing can escape its secure location during the re-entry portion, and the visors are down. So basically the crew is locked and loaded, ready to come home. Taking a look at this question coming to us from Taniko wow, this is tough. Tiniko Tikza Baloy, I apologize for not pronouncing that correctly. When the Dragon approaches Earth, how do you make sure that it does not collide with airplanes in flight? That's a great question. So part of the process to launch a spacecraft or bring it home is basically to get a license from the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, and basically request that airspace and sea space be quarantined off in a keep-out zone, basically, so that aircraft and sea vessels are not in danger during this phase. So, yeah, it's a great question, because you really have to think of, because the Earth is a sphere, it's a globe, it is a three-dimensional process to re-enter the atmosphere. It's not just coming back down to Earth. It is that three-dimensional space, that airspace that has to be cleared and saved, basically. Great question.
That is a good question. And I've seen some pretty amazing pictures before of people in commercial airplanes as they are en route somewhere and can see one of the spacecrafts lift off. So I would love to have that opportunity someday.
Same. Although with how often we're launching out of Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, it's certainly more likely now than it ever has been to catch a rocket launch from your window seat while flying into Orlando Airport. Another question coming to us, this one from Joshua Green. How do the departing astronauts make sure they don't accidentally leave any of their stuff on the International Space Station? And has anyone forgotten anything up there?
Well, there are checklists to make sure that the astronauts don't leave anything on the space station. And of course, I'm sure something has been left behind at some point, but there's always somebody going up and coming back down. So maybe one of their friends is kind enough to bring it back for them. The crew members themselves have a very limited amount of